Alright, well this is day 2 of working on just completely restructuring Ancient Archer game engine, and I've been working on the windowing system and the callbacks, and I kind of got myself into a monkey wrench of a situation. I'm just kind of overthinking it at this point, I think, and I just want to document this experience because I'm sure I'll get over it. I've got some new ideas of things that will probably work, but that's not the point. Alright, so here's what I'm thinking and what I'm trying to accomplish. So the core thing here is we've got callbacks, and they take a window to set the callback up with. But I want to be able to instantiate more than one window, and I want it to work properly depending on what it's focused, on which one's focused. So I want to only have one keyboard, scroll, mouse input, and it to switch to controlling that window whenever you're focused on it. So I guess I gotta set up the different windows, and this is where I kind of logically get stuck. But I found a document here. I guess it's a forum. I was searching up how to use multiple windows, detect which it's under, and it looks like the answer is basically you need to use set cursor enter callback and basically change anything over. But one of the things here is I'm using my own class called window that kind of ties everything together and handles the multiple instantiation stuff. So yeah, I guess what I need to do here is something like this guy says, and that is for each window, when I create it, I need to set its cursor enter callback. And on these callbacks, I probably need to switch over which one is doing the keyboard or scroll or mouse input. I guess that's where I kind of get confused here. Because basically I only wanted to take these inputs from the window that's currently focused. And when you switch to another one, it still updates the same stuff. So I could give them all a shared pointer access to it, or I could just have one. Okay, well that's where I'm at. I'm going to see if I can get it working. Alright, so, and just to state for the final goal of this, I would even want to do this as just a epic benchmark test. Open a window that does GL4 or OpenGL rendering, open a window that's using DirectX, and open a window that's using Vulkan, and have them all running fine. Is that possible? I don't know. Someday I'll find out. But that's what I'm kind of gearing towards, is just smoothing this out and making it a nice back-end window that'll call the appropriate renderer, and then we'll have our controller send commands and stuff to the model and view as needed. The model's not even on the radar yet. That'll be next. But that's going to be something different. Alright, I'm getting rambling now. I'm going to get back to coding and I'll report back later. Alright, so I figured out a bit of a solution to this whole thing. You have to set the window user pointer, which was in that forum thread I just shared. This is nothing new. They're not the first to discover it. It's just where I kind of realized what it does. So what this does is it takes your window pointer and sets it to whatever class is calling it, which is going to, in my case, just this class called window, plain old window. So it sets the user pointer to this. Now, what this does for us is when we now set the callbacks, we're passing in this pointer, and it's going to have a user pointer to the class. So in theory, I'm still getting to the point where I can actually test this. For example, when we do our frame buffer size set callback, one of the things I want to do is update the cached width and height. The problem is, that was stored in these Windows options. So I made this Windows options a shared pointer. That way it has its own control block for each instantiation. And then when we hit this callback, it's going to grab whatever window instantiated the GLFW window. So this is going to sound a little confusing because when I just say plain window, I probably mean my window class. And I'm going to try to say GLFW window when I mean their class. Because clearly I just have it as a little piece of potential data for the window. And we have our reasons. And the reason it's a pointer, of course, is so we can initialize it how we want, depending on these window options. All right, anyway, I'm getting a little sidetracked. So the point is we can use the GLFW window pointer and get the user pointer, cast it to the class it's supposed to be, and bam, there we have access to the class that is calling it just by having the window. So the set user pointer is a very handy thing. I'm gonna have to look into that. I'm not sure how they implement that. That's cool though. I guess it's probably a lot. It's just a void pointer. Yeah, it just points. Okay, that's cool. So of course you're gonna have to be a little careful with this, but it should work fine in this case because yeah, just the way everything's structured anyway. So there we go. And I'm just creating a new shared pointer to frame buffer controls. It's just temporary here, but that's just so we can update the cached width and height. Now, I also have this function called, let me find it here, apply changes. And that's really important because for these windows, just flipping these options doesn't do anything until you hit apply changes. But we can cache things that have changed, like when the frame buffer size, that's the window resizing, we want the width and height to be updated as well, so we don't have to use GLFW calls every time we want to get that necessarily. And they are cached right here. They have defaults, and this in theory should just update those, but we don't want to call apply changes here because, well, the changes have already been applied by this frame buffer size callback. And then we've still got more stuff to do, a lot more work, but that's one hurdle crossed. And it looks like I'm not going to need, I was going to like reinstantiate this receiver and do something with that, but I don't think we need to do that. We'll just do it like this and make it localized every time. But in theory, what we also could do is we could go like this and we could just like update it here. Yeah, like that. And then call these here. And then the thing we want to do here is at the end of each of these functions, or whenever we're done accessing it, is we want to release it. So it would be like window option receiver, and then just call, oh, I think it's dot release or reset. Yeah, dot reset. And that'll just kind of blank it out and make it show so it's not pointing at anything. So there's probably more we could do here. Like we could check if it's the right options already and not have to do any of this stuff or something like that. Potentially, but that's just going to get more confusing, and it's not even necessarily going to optimize anything. So maybe I will leave this here right now. I like it being like this because, well, you could let's see, you could access this with xturn. So we don't actually want to do that. So we probably want to make these static, at least this one. But these other ones, we're going to probably want to access from outside. So these are going to be like they are. And I think the Windows got an xturn of those. Very good. And that is so that we only have a single set of these inputs, no matter how many windows we have. And we'll have to do some clever things here too, which I've got to research and figure out. But it shouldn't be much longer before we have some windows popping up and be able to switch between them and put whatever context we want on each of them. Why am I implementing this feature again? I don't even think my game is going to use it. I just got in my head that I wanted to redo everything, and this is upgrading the window to be better than it used to be, pretty much. Alright, and as we're digging on into it, there's maybe even a more clever and better thing we could do where we don't have to have this extra shared pointer, and it doesn't even need to be a shared pointer if it's generally all internal. Well, we're still going to leave it as a shared pointer here because we're still going to leave this get Windows options public. But what we can do is we can make all these callbacks friends, which means they have access to the private members of this class. So this particular callback will be allowed to access these window options. But these callbacks how do they know which one to get to? And now with the user pointer, we can just grab the right instance and say, okay, set it. And since this function has access to this private options, there's no need to go through a getter and stuff. That's kind of weird for private internal parts anyway. So I think that's going to be a better solution there, and we should be able to go forward with that, and we won't have to call reset, and it should save us a little bit of... So I just thought of something, and that is we can choose which callback it's going to call to with this windowing tech, which should be rendering tech. That makes a lot more sense. Yeah, so now we're going to be able to go to these callbacks, and we're also going to be able to switch on the rendering tech and decide which viewport update. That way, this properly, well, you can properly support the callbacks handling any of the rendering techs that we might end up using. Of course, right now we're only doing OpenGL, but at some point we will be doing the other ones. So let's go ahead and get that in here. Well, you just need a case for the rendering tech to be, what is it? Render tech. I think it's just render underscore tech. And then OpenGL for here. We want, of course, D3D and Vulkan 1. And on those cases, we're just going to break. Now, we could throw an error. I don't know about throwing errors on a frame buffer size callback, but I guess it's, we should never get here anyway. This is just boilerplate for later, basically. So the next thing we want to do is update our projection matrices. I haven't got to that yet, but this should pretty much take care of the frame buffer size callback function until we have a system of projection matrices we know we want to update. So I finally got to a point where I feel half decent about how this windowing system is set up. Overall, it is pretty straightforward. There's only one way you're allowed to initialize it, and we should actually say that the default window is deleted, and private too. Why not? Now I would just make it public. So now the only way to create this class is with window options. And we have, of course, I guess I'll just go over the whole class for now. A way to get the window options, that way we can potentially change them from somewhere else and then apply those changes if we're happy with it. So we've got some default initialization stuff, the callbacks. Here are friends, so they can access the options and anything else they might need that we might add later. And let's take a look at the definitions. Well, in here we have some extern to these functions because we need to know about them. They're only declared over here. This here is not actually a declaration, or not a proper one, I don't think. I don't know, I might actually play around with this a little bit. You can put extern here in the class extern friend. That's a little weird, but that means we could remove these if it works. Let's see, no, it doesn't seem to like it. Okay, so we're gonna have to have it here. We're gonna keep it the way it was. This is just something I'm kind of playing around with a little bit. It seems to work okay with the way it was. Where it's a friend here, extern up here. Alright, so there's the initializer. It just sets the Windows options to whatever we provided and then calls default init. Now default init is basically gonna read all our options and try to set up things, and currently we're only doing OpenGL, so it just launches an OpenGL window. Tries to get 4.6 if possible, and makes the context current, procs the address. I didn't want any OpenGL calls in here, so that's why this is moved over like so. But that's comes with its own, I don't want to say issues, but I don't know. I'd like to do this some other way. I'm trying to think of a better way. I guess I'll readdress that when rendering becomes more of a thing. Set the user pointer to this class. That way we can get it in the callbacks. And then we set the callbacks. And there's only 2 right now, but obviously we'll have more later. And basically, well, the error one we set earlier. the frame buffer size set callbacks. When the window size changes, we already went over that one. And we got a mouse reporting, which I'm still working on, because basically we want to update the mouse input receiver, but we've got to have it set first, and it's going to be shared across all the windows. But well, the idea is only the window that's active is actually going to use whatever's coming in, but it could in theory get the input from any window. I don't know if that's the best idea or if I should make a new one of these for each. Still thinking about that a little bit. But that's pretty much how it's going to go. And what we're working on now is just a front-end interface of this where you can initialize a new instance. And each call to this is going to open a new window with the options provided. So you could essentially keep opening windows with different options. So like we were saying earlier, we want to get one of each renderer up just as a epic benchmark. But that's basically where I left off now. So I'm trying to come up with a nice core structure for the front end. And I think I'm going to basically make a class of instances. Might as well store them in a vector. And we're going to carefully manage this vector of instances. I think that'll work. I'm still working this one out.